Good evening, mayong gabi. Ani ana puta karon sa ato ang regular last Wednesday of the month nga programming dinhi sa Celias Partners-in-Law. Ako si Attorney Irene and Caballes of the Cebu Lady Lawyers Association and also of the Legal Alternatives for Women Center, Inc. We are very pleased to bring to you tonight on September 30, 2020, one of the leading government physicians dinhi sa Cebu, sa Cebu, unya makadiscuss siya nato sa ato ang topic karon nga rights of patients and obligations of patients versus the rights of physicians and healthcare providers. It is a very timely topic kay naa gyud day national health issue happening right now. Not only national, it's really a global health issue. Now, before I introduce our guest for this evening, mo explain lang sad ko why, because I know that when we go outside, we're supposed to wear our face masks. And yet here in our program, we are wearing face shields. We decided on this kay para madunggan og klaro gyud ang ato ang discussion without also compromising on the safety. This is not to say nga kung naata sa gawas, going about our business, we do not wear face mask because the face mask is really the one prescribed by the government, no? But we are just telling you that we have not also lacked in implementing safety measures here in the studio because the studio is a controlled environment. There are no more than 2 or 3 people in the studio right now. Di gyud pwede nga mag-crowd. We are implementing social distancing. So with that disclaimer in place, let us begin sa ato ang program. And palit na kong remind, when you go out, always wear your, not only your shield, but also your mask. Mask and shield go together. Okay, our guest for tonight's topic is the training officer of the surgery department of the Cebu City Medical Center. So physician, good government physician. He is also currently the chairman of surgery for Cebu South Medical Center. Ang kanang Cebu South Medical Center, that's the Talisay District Hospital. It's just been recently renamed. And not only that, he took his medical course at the Gulyas College of Medicine. So parihaming duha, taga UV. Unya, not only that pagyud, aside from being ganap na medical physician, he is also a barrister. He took up his law degree in the University of San Carlos. So please welcome with me Dr. Ferdinand Kionisala. Doc, thank you. Maayong gabi. Salamat kaayo for guesting here.
Thank you also for having me here in your program.
Okay. So, without further ado, kaning atong topic karong gabi, Doc, rights and obligations of patients versus the rights of physicians and healthcare providers. This is very timely. This is very timely because naabya tay global pandemic coming up, and then this pandemic is of such a new sort. It's a new virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and wala pay kanang klaro nga medical standards or protocols in place in addressing this virus. We are still learning as we go along, but there are already some kanang constants, no, in our Philippine healthcare system. So primero, unsay mga katungod sa atong mga pasyente, not just for COVID-19, but this is standard for all patients who need medical care and are receiving medical care. Sige, Doc. So, what are the rights?
Okay, ang rights na to, gibalanse na siya sa, katong sa pasyente, at the same time, adto po sa physician, dapat balanse siya. So, for the patients, the general concept is, the patient has the right to know.
To know.
And then, what is encompassing about that knowledge of knowing, kanang like, what is he actually in? Like, what is his diagnosis? Unsa iya sakit? Dapat siya mahibaloan na. Dapat kahibalo sad siya og to address sa iyahang diagnosis, to address sa iyahang concern, to address sa iyahang gipamati, unsaon siya pagtambal. Now, kining pagtambal, magbuwag sad siya, magsanga siya, naa siya gitawag na to og diagnostic, naa sad siya therapeutic.
So when we say diagnostic, unsa man na yung
Ang diagnostic, for example, like ako iglabad akong ulo or malipong ko. So naatay kanang at first hand inig atubang nimo sa doktor, ang doktor na siya ideya like pwede ni siya high blood. Pero ang issue is high blood ra ba gyud.
Yun,
So
yes.
pwede sa ni siya high blood o niya anemic sa tingali ni siya kay ngano malipong man siya. So now, ang issue is it pure high blood? Then here comes now the diagnostic to prove nga high blood ra gyud ni siya. Amo na yung diagnostic. Then the other side of the spectrum of treatment sa pasyente is the therapeutic side. When say therapeutic, mo na ni ang pagtambal. Like, do you change lifestyle? Do you need medications? Do you need a device, for example? If ang heart is affected, for example, do you need a pacemaker for the heart? So, these are now the therapeutic. Unya, napagid siya murag extension pag yun aning therapeutic. If sa spectrum sa sakit, naamatay early, naatay late stage. If niabot na ka sa late stage that human intervention may not necessarily improve it, ninanatay gitawag palliative.
mo na ng palliative
The
care.
palliative care. So, wala na siya. That is the spectrum. So, sa kaning tulo ka aspeto sa pag-manage sa pasyente, dapat kay balo ang pasyente o unsaon siya. Unya, dapat mo respeto ang physician. Even with our knowledge, we still have to ask the patient, Sir, ma'am, unsay gusto nimong himuon? Sir, mura bag ni adto ka og dining kuan kanang buffet, for example. What is it do you really want?
Mag a la carte or mag buffet.
Buffet, yeah, there you go.
Pero kanang going back anang informing the patient sa kuan doc no. Even if, for example, ang you know that the treatment might ato na lang din lang ta mulayo. Let's say sa kaning current pandemic karon, you know that part sa treatment, part sa kanang care is isolation.
Yes.
It might not necessarily be the most kanang humane. So unsaon na pud na pagbalanse kay even as if the patient has the right to know, has the right to informed consent, naabya say obligations ang pasyente pod. But then naapod gihapon siya right to humane care and treatment. So unsaon na siya like
Okay, so
in all cases siya ra ba mo'y magbuot? Bahala mo, dili ko pa isolate. Nganong adto man ko dito layo, di ba?
common kay na siya nga issue. It's not only sa ato sa pandemic, kanang even na atay mga sakit nga kanang infectious.
TB.
Yeah, example, common kayo ang TB, pero sa karon murag wa na may nahadlok sa TB.
Mas nahadlok sila sa COVID.
Mas nahadlok sa COVID.
Because TB.
Yeah, anyway. So, ang atong punto there is a hierarchy of kanang needs and desires, okay? O ang there are applicable laws. So for example, if ang imong sakit dili igtatakod, dili ka kanang sa term sa Tagalog makapanghawa or you cannot affect other people, then ang concern is you alone. But if ever your disease can affect other people, then your rights, okay, are limited. Dili siya pwede nga because I like it to be so. Because if I do it as I wish it to be, what will happen is that maybe without the intention of infecting other people, wala intay sala tong imong silingan or imong kauban sa balay, but in the process of you being hard-headed and being so self-centered, okay, you inflict other people, and these rights have to be balanced.
Kay nabi yung uban kay like makadungog man tas mga anecdotal gid dok no nga di na lang ta magpakuan oy di na lang ta maski nagduda na sila di na lang ta magpaswab oy kay basig kuhaon ta makitaan man guday nila dok kanang sa TV nga or so, even sa mga silingan nga
sa barangay
gikuha. So dili sa jud na siya sakto nga mindset no
Dili
because
siya.
you're not just endangering yourself, you might be endangering others. Or even di lang gani sa mga communicable diseases doc, like for example nakabantay ko kay before I used to work with the public attorney's office nga ang mga accused pud namo doc usahay na may mga kuan kanang mental nga kung dili makainom og tambal magwala. So kana sila maskin pa og dili di gani sa ganahan mo inom og tambal kay okay ra gyud kuno sila nya nganong paimnon sila. Pero kana kung ilahang ingani ni doc no kung pananglitan ang ilahang psychological or psychiatric condition is such that they will pose a danger to themselves and others, confinement.
Confinement.
So you, while patients have rights, they also have responsibilities. So, kung ang patient gahig ulo, kinsa naman iyahang guardian ana? Kinsa may like for example, bro, di naman gyud siguro ni maka-informed consent kay sobra naman ni ka kanang na highly strung. What if positive sa COVID, unya naapoy paranoia na schizophrenia na, unsaon man na, kinsa na may muhatag anang consent do.
Ang matatong kan, we will put it into proper perspective. Okay, so in general, ang patient will have to consent. That's the dictum, that's the dogma that the patient's choice has to be respected. Okay, but ang iyang rights are limited the moment it involves now or encroaches upon other people. And the law and then the state also imposes it so that everybody is going to be safe. Now, if in an emergency, for example, kanang na disgrasya no or kanang giatake right there and then unya walay laing tao nga makahatag og consent. Okay, now the presumption, because ang physician, when we pass the licensure exam, okay, we took the Hippocratic oath, and ang amog yung primordial directive is actually to save lives. So for as long as you needed our help, even if you don't actually consent to it, had you been given the chance to deny it, okay, but because of your situation, you cannot, for example, get stroke ka, for example, na di na mo function ng imong brain, our presumption is because you were brought to us, you caught our attention, then the presumption is you need our help. Of course, if ever mga ning moabot na ang imuhang relatives or kanang special someone, for example, who can tell na, I'm sorry, he has already given us the status that if ever this happens to him, he doesn't want treatment, then of course we will respect that.
Okay. So ang inyo emergency, give gyudayon the emergency care. Mao di ay na. So kay this also entered my mind while you were discussing, Doc, kanang mga suicides.
Yes.
There is a clear intent gyud sa ilang part to do self-harm. Unya, ikaw as a physician, do I have consent to help this person so that his life is saved? So bahala pa tong iyahang decision nga to do self-harm. At kamo basta makakita mo nga kinahanglan gyud, we need to act on this kay otherwise he will die. Then inyog yung tabangon. Pero wa pa man ka sa jud mo nakiha hinuon, Doc, no, by somebody who said you ruined his death. Unay ko ansan, no, kay basig ang gusto man jud ko ako man tong pagbuot nga moamba ko in the front of a speeding truck. But then no. Your presumption is this person needs help. We have to save his life. So when it comes to, you were saying about mga next of kin giving consent to do procedures or giving the directive not to continue treatment, kinsa may naay hierarchy, Doc?
Okay,
so uming kag next of kin.
Ang hierarchy, of course, for example, if the patient is a minor, automatic yun na ang parents. Okay, now if for example like incapacitated, like katong bisag dagko na sila gida, di na sila minor, but because of mental issues, for example, then of course if the parents are still around, a legal guardian, if ever his status was given to somebody else, it could actually be next of kin, ang family nga, like aunties and lolas, for example, pero it could actually be a total stranger whom the family felt that the person is secured under his legal care. Kana siya. Now in the hospital we have a position,
and also the spouses,
unmarried. Married, oo. Katong klarong married, dili katong ipon-ipon because aligre kay na sa hospital. Pag abot mo ingon siya na I am the wife. And of course, siyempre ibutang man na sa kanang first part yun nga, whether married or not. Then later it turned out nga dili siya legal nga wife.
So it's only spouses who have kanang the murag legal obligation and also the legal relationship, no, and authority nga mohatag og consent or unsa.
And then there is also in the hospital, if ever you happen to be there in an emergency and nobody can decide what to do with you, as we said, ang primordial directive is to save lives at all times. So the hospital has a kanang gitawag og senior house officer. Okay, so the example sa government hospital, the chief medical officer, okay, gives a designation that this person, this doctor is going to be the senior house officer. And in the absence of anybody giving the consent for whatever is going to be done to the patient, he is the one that
That is
tells
his call.
That is his
Even
call.
if even if the emergency happened nga, for example, he was given this and then ning off na siya kay of course even physicians need their
But-
off times and then all of a sudden while he was while he was off naay emergency nga nahitabo iya gyud gihapon call
Yeah.
tawgon gyud siya.
Now, the senior house officer is supposed to be in the hospital. Dili siya on call.
So, he
is
has
actually
to
on
stay?
duty. He has to stay.
Oh.
So that
Wa
if
siya
ever-
social life, doc.
But that is as for example like what we do in Talisay District Hospital or now Cebu South, there is one but you are supposed to be on duty also and you are the senior house officer so you decide for things that nobody can decide on.
Okay. Uy, we were given a signal already. Please stay tuned. We will be back. Balik ta. Naana po ta karon sa ato ang rights and obligations of patients versus the rights and obligations of healthcare providers. So, during our break, kami ni Dr. Ferdy continue mi sa amo ang mga discussion ba. Unya napangutana gyud nako sa iya, doc. Di ba ang mga pasyente naa may right to privacy? Murag sa nagsyag ka ng bank secrecy law, dili ninyo pwede i-disclose taga-asa unsay sakit nga kinsa mo'y naasa na admitted sa hospital. Pero are there certain conditions na the right of privacy or confidentiality might be set aside gawas kung of course na may usahay no nga ang patient mismo consent di mo consent gyud siya nga i-disclose ninyo so you can consult with other physicians or ana, but maski di pa siya mo consent na ay instances where his right of privacy and confidentiality will have to be set aside.
Okay, so that instance is public safety concern, okay, supersedes sa iyang kaugalingong rights. So for example like kinsa may gusto nga mahibaw-an ng imong sakit, okay?
Correct.
Labaw na gyud og for example you're a public figure, not necessarily politiko, but for example artista ka nga
Artista
wala
ka.
ikaw nasakit ikag TB ingon ana.
Oh,
Okay?
oh.
But if ever usually this involves kanang infectious diseases. Okay? Kay makatakod man gud. So naa siya concerned with other people getting the disease what you already have. So kana siya if ever there is a rule against that kanang non-disclosure, you are actually mandated to tell if
tell.
ever you do have it.
Oo.
Okay?
And you are mandated to submit yourself for whatever treatment or isolation in order to protect others. So, mao gid ay na. So, ang right to privacy and confidentiality can be waived when the public health and safety demand, no? Or kung ang court order na mismo.
Ang kaon.
Kung ang korte basta dahil we are all the kuan gyud subjects gyud of the court.
The court,
Maingon ang
oo.
court ikuan na kay people need to know or his physicians need to know or kinahanglan gyud nga ma-disclose. Okay. Regarding pud aning we already touched a bit about informed consent. Kaning information, right to information do, kung pwede atong ika ng palawman dapita. Lisod biya sad for physicians to I don't like to use the word to dumb down. To dumb down na lang sige to make it we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, pero ang patient ana usahay wa gyud nakaget. So
Nakagets.
to what extent man gyud ning right of information kay basin kung magsige na lang pud mo kanang storya or explain din precious time could be kuan kay maski gun sa pila biya ka years ninyo gistudyohan ang medicine di ba doc niya man kung inyo yung i-inform all throughout what is sufficient information.
Okay. So, we put it in proper perspective. There are emergency situations, lahi na siya nga status. But of course, if these are the non-emergency situations, then you have ample time to talk with your patient, okay?
And the family.
And the family, if ever, mga niya. Napagay uban aning mga issues nga, like for example, ako'y pasyente, di ko gusto mahibaw akong asawa, di ko gusto mahibaw akong anak nga mao ni akong sakit. Now, just like ragod gihapon sa lawyer o ang imong client nga relationship, you have this relationship has to be respected. regardless, even if naa dito ang spouse behind, if he says that I do not like my wife to know, pareha po ni pare nangumpisal siya, dili kinahanglan mahibaw yung asawa kung unsay gikumpisal. So pasinti gyapon sa doktor, if the patient insists that the wife should not know, then it has to be respected.
Unya doki. Kani hypothetical lang yun ni, pero I know that this could happen, and I presume na this is quite common. Wala mosulti ang pasyente kay di siya gusto nga ma-disturb ang iyang family. Pero kinahanglan di ay siya mga katunang mga experimental drugs gani kay di ay ito cancer niya. Mura kung dili to ko nang we call it a Hail Mary pass, kung dili to ko anan ato, sure man gyud siya nga makuan. Unya inigabot sa billing, magyaw-yaw ang asawa unsa man ni, para unsa man ni, ngano man ni, di ba kanang anong gitagaan man ni ing ani, ngano unsa man ni ana. So asa man ana karon mo'y ko anon, explainan na lang pud ang kay sila biya mo kung titahay mo nagbayad. It's the family shouldering the burden.
So usually ang amuhang management is number one, patient first, okay? Then we tell now the patient, specifically for non-emergency situation, we tell them, sir or ma'am, would you like somebody to be here with us? Ato ni siyang istoryahan. Pero if sa iyahang paminaw dili siya gusto nga naay laing tao, then we will have to respect that. Okay? Now, the moment nga ni pag-abot na diri sa kato ng financial aspect of the treatment, magbiling na nga naanay magyaw-yaw, ang among istorya ana, ma'am, I guess you have to talk to your patient. Ana rami, di na mo dwell na. I think this is inyohan ning aside.
Correct sa no, sakto sa jud na do kay kalisod ba pud anang secret keeper ba mo sa pasyente niya, kamo pa mo'y mabaw og himo og excuses niya, labi nag mga kuan kanang mga extraordinary measures na gyud inyong gikuan, and then they incur additional expenses for the family food. So muna dapat ang pasabot kay ang patient
na. Pero kung it's a lot easier if ever the family is involved, okay? Usually for long and lingering diseases, very common, like kami mo pirami og cancer. Usually cancer is a long and lingering sakit.
Maayo mo balik.
More nga na ba. So therefore, I would rather have it nga na ay family behind the patient as support group, because if ever og wala na siya, lisod kaayo nga siya ray nagsuffer, unya di nga ni kahibaw nga nganong nalagas naman na iyang buhok na inigabot ni doktor, si nanay ba nakamatikod mi nga nahurot na iyang buhok, yun sa madina nimo na og dili og naagyoy clear cut gyud ba nga designation ang pasyente, ako ra gyud ang mahibaw, din moingon ra gyud mi, ma'am kanang niagilan na siya og tambal, pero kung unsa na kamula istorya sa imong pasyente ana lisod.
Pero naa sa ubang patients dok no nga so kanang private or proud di gid gusto nga kaluy-an sila, so ay lang usaba siya ra. Pero kung ako I would share kay para naapoy time sa tung ako ang loved ones nga in kaso ba kinahanglan goodbye na ko, di ba, para di po sila luoy pero kung makalitan ka nga mauna di ay ito niya wag yun musultis nanay.
Naasa na like for example kaning moligi na kanang labi na og sa spectrum sa sakit, you are now towards the end. Ang mga ginikanan or if not ang katong like the wife for example, kinsa magigustong magbuwag tag sayo-sayo, right? Pero og ang pasyente mo niingon, I do not like to be resuscitated. Lisod kay na pagkahuman, ikaw nga doktor, gibinlan gyud kag pinirmahan. DNR, do not resuscitate. Lisod kayo na nga imong ingnon ang wife the worst pag yun, ikaw may mugawas nga daotan. Kay ikaw sa wa kay gihimo, wa kay post nga pagka-doktor. But my hands are yes, ay sus kana. Kanang truth is a lot stranger than fiction. We have that in the hospital. Mahitabo, lisod.
The patient wants to go, but the family, ayaw, doc, do everything.
Yes.
Unsaon man na, pero mura nakabasa bitaw ko og kanang essay once, The Dignity of Dying, usahay kuan gid na sa pasyente gid na how he wants to go.
So, and we have to respect
that. So bahala na lang ang doktor ingnon nga wag gyud ninyo kuan na dok, wag gyud ninyo tabanga, wag gyud ninyo ma'am, ang pasyente na lang gid amuhang gikuan.
Naamagod niya sa mo nang kung mga DNR nga ni, it has to be a written document, dili siya pwedeng verbal. Okay? So, pwede na og if you went to our office, dili sa hospital, you have that in your kanang patient's logbook, dito gid ninyong ipasign gid siya nga if something wrong happens to him, he doesn't want to be resuscitated. That should also be kay dito po na gi-appeal, gi-attach po na sa hospital record so that if anything will somebody will contest, siya ma'am na abi siya gipirmahan si sir. Ana na siya. Then it becomes a lot easier to talk with the relatives.
Like kuan mo unsa na ko sa ako ang personal experience doc ba kay murag timely kayo sa imong gisulti. Katawanan kaayo kay a family member of mine, my dad. Well, he passed away already, but before he did, mga some years before he did, he had to undergo an emergency procedure. So katong imong gisulti nga why laing tao nga makahatag og consent? Ako ra. Pagmata niya from the procedure, so what then just whiteboard? Do not operate on me.
Pero after
Too late. Too late. Dahan. Mauna na din ha. Kay, makakasuwat sa whiteboard daan. Di ako mo nag-decide. Anyways, unya, I also came across one right of patients, doc, to choose a healthcare provider or a facility. Is this right to choose a healthcare provider or facility absolute? Or there are really certain cases nga ang government na gyud mo choose para nimo nga tinhira gyud ka nga kanang facility?
Okay, so again, everything will have to be put into context. Og emergency nga ning na siya, the primordial directive is always to save lives. So whether you are on this facility that you do not like, because that situation demands that he be treated right there and then.
Walain nga
Walain, okay. But the moment that you, like for example, you regain consciousness or you are now in your kanang mental state that is capable of deciding who, okay, depende sa doktor, or where, depende sa hospital facility or whatever facility there may be, that you would like to undergo this treatment, okay, then ikaw ana ang mo sulti. Now, the next thing is, if ever this is like government funded ang imuhang financial support. A good example is kanang PhilHealth, okay? Now, there are things that are okay with PhilHealth, okay? There are things that are not okay. So for example, there are drugs, okay, that are new and not yet been reflected in the National Drug Formulary that you would like to avail of because this is not available, for example, in other countries. Now, if you want it to be funded and supported by PhilHealth, but it is not written there, then you cannot undergo this so-called treatment that you so desire because you are relying on PhilHealth. If you should still pursue this treatment protocol, then you'll have to pay it on your own.
So wala na, mawag na ang government katong benefits
so
or
those are
protection.
things that we have to be put in proper perspective.
Hala, time sa kay kanira bang sa ato ang pandemic karon dok, wala pa may naay mga ubang mga treatment protocols no wala pa dinhi sa ato so lalisuno na gyud hinuon sa kayo na kay everybody relying on PhilHealth. Ang PhilHealth baya karon murag na controversy food. So mao sa di ay na moy. So i-check na lang gyud sa National Formulary kung PhilHealthable ba. Kay especially for karon sa ato ang very current nga health crisis COVID-19. Dili biya tanan nga moingon sila nga in other countries this has been proven to have some effect, but if wala pa na ma-approve diri sa Pilipinas, so do not expect that the government will shoulder that.
Another thing that I'd like to add, okay, there are health facilities that are run by kanang religious organization. Okay. Now, if you talk about this religious organization, they also have certain doctrines that have to be followed. A good example is family planning techniques, okay? Beyond kani sa ilang consideration. A good example kani sa kanang rhythm, for example, maora niyang allowed aning health facility. So for example, if you want tubal ligation after cesarean section, cesarean section can be done. But if you want further treatment for the ligation, then this has to be done in somebody else's facility, not in that facility.
Not the facility of your choice. Because even the facility of your choice also has options. Kadiri ra gyud mitaman. Kay it's against our faith. We are founded on this.
Another thing, for example, in vitro fertilization. Some kanang religious hospitals, religious organization, a hospital run or a hospital, kay do not allow artificial insemination.
Insemination,
So this
oh.
has to be done in another health
Elsewhere.
facility. So
Or even the kanang mga emergency transfusions, doc, no, maskin pag unsa na kay there are
Yeah.
still also some hospitals nga dili pwede ang transfusion of blood. Oh.
just like personal ni siya usually, so among experience sa surgery, Jehovah Witness patients, okay?
Okay.
They have made it very clear when they engage our services that this patient will never allow blood transfusion, and we just simply have to work ourselves
Your way
around it, okay?
Nga sa surgery baya gyud, doc, ang first ra ba gyud unta niya inon, ma'am, unsa nga blood ma'am, blood type B si sir, pag tigo mo ani.
Pagtigo,
Pero when it comes to certain religious groups, absolute
Absolute
no.
na and we have to respect that, and we have done several surgeries, okay? Amo lang yung gisultihan daan nga kay ma'am, ideally we would need a reserve blood, but if ever we do incur this much, okay, this is something that you have to accept, okay? That so far blood has not yet been kanang replicated enough sa science, okay? Wa pa tay naimbentong kani, okay? Volume too big, but
Yes.
ang peculiar magud ang blood because it's the only structure in the human body that carries oxygen while lain.
Wala, correct.
So therefore if you lose so much blood, oxygen dili mada.
Oo. Sa ganahan ko ano yung gisulti, doc, nga blood has never been replicated. You can add on to the volume, pero moingon ka, no, it's really the body that regenerates its own blood cells. Okay, wow, nindot sa ato ang topic karon, doc. But we now have to pause again for a short break. We will be back. And we're back. We are down to our final 20 minutes of the show, pero murag lami pag yung kayo ang discussion namo ni Doc Ferdy. So, we were running down through some of the rights of and obligations of the patients, and also the rights of healthcare providers, no? Nga karon I came across na pod this one right nga murag kinahanglan sa jud mahibaw-an, the right to medical records. Can you explain this, Doc? To what extent ang right sa patient to have medical records, or if the patient is gone already, to what extent his family can obtain the medical records? Tanan-tanan ba? Absolutely ba? Or na ay limitations?
Okay, so the information that the hospital or the physician gets in the course of treatment, no? Kay mao man na ang reason nga nung niduol siya namo for treatment or concern regarding sa medicine, iyaha gyud na, he owns it, okay? The physician or the hospital facility doesn't actually own it, okay?
Okay.
It's just a temporary thing nga naa na diha ninyo. But at any given time that the patient wishes to get hold of it, okay, that is something that you cannot withhold. Just like, for example, if in hospital A, for example, phase 1 sa iyang treatment was done there, and then for whatever reason he doesn't want to proceed with phase B, for example, he wants it done in another health facility, he can always tell hospital A that because I am moving my treatment to hospital B, the things that was done, okay, and the records appertaining thereto will have to be transported to facility B already. So dili pwede makaingon ang letter A nga dili uy kay amo man ni, because those actually belongs to the patient, okay? But the limitation now is, for example, kinsa man ang pwedeng makakuha. So for example, if the patient is still alive and in his usual faculties, he alone can actually direct the hospital.
Or iyang attorney in fact.
Or attorney in fact, for example, or the court, for example, will deem it necessary that it has to be given to the next facility. Dili pwede nga, for example, ang mga anak, if ever the father or the parents has not actually directed and given the children that right. But if of course if ang parents or for example kumatos ingon ana ang gusto sila mo balhin, we presume that right, okay, because di naman siya makahatag sa iyang directive because unconscious siya, for example, then the next of kin, so pwede na the spouse, of course ang iyang mga anak.
So ang right to medical records gyud kay ang medical records belong to the patient.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, kaning the right of having medical records automatic yun sa na doc, no, even if for example gi-discharge ng pasyente wa siya nangayo sa medical records, but then
Later on.
ihatag mong gina doc, no.
Okay.
Oo.
So for ease and convenience, okay? Because depende lang og unsa ka short or kadugayon ang stay sa. So for very short engagement, sayon ra kay paghimo. But if ever og ni-stay siya sa ICU for example 3 months, uy, that's
Taas,
quite long.
daghan,
Okay? So normally what we know, like example ako, I am also practicing in private hospitals. What I usually do is I always add in the order before discharge, provide the patient kanang discharge diagnosis before discharge. So di na siya mobalik nako. Kaya ako naman siya daang gi-providean. So it cuts short the kanang gukod-gukod sa akong pirma. Kaya ako naman gi-order daan nga tagaan na siya og discharge diagnosis. Because I find it very convenient nga inipauli sa pasyente, for example, mangutana iyang spouse or iyang mga anak, naon sa day ka, gioperahan man ko. Nganong gioperahan man katay? Basta gioperahan ko. See? But it cut short that conversation if ever nga naabi gipadas Dr. Kione o na yun na mao di ini. So that becomes convenient on my part, but other doctors do not do the way what I did. Okay, so ang mahitabo, they will have to mo na nakauli na, then they will have to go back to the hospital to get the discharge diagnosis. The complete record kanang gitawag namo og kanang clinical abstract. That's a very detailed detailed na siya. Usually per demand. Per demand. So for example, if you need kanang further treatment, for example, that medical abstract has to be sent because they will not know what medications or what diagnostic protocol were actually done already. So kinahanglan to siya.
Okay, the reason nangutana sa jud ko aning medical records doc ba, kay nabi ubang pasyente i-discharge nila. Okay na, discharge na ko and then not curious enough.
Yes,
But sometimes kung mahatagan sila daan sa medical records, makitaan dito nga naa di ay like for instance ning undergo og kanang surgical procedure, gi-remove ba ning certain body part, unya wa lang ta kahibaw nga gipabiopsy di ay. So ang patient sad marag, okay, humanat to. Wala na. Without thinking na basig na apay further treatment na needed. So kaning kinsa may na ay obligation ana doc nga i-inform ang treatment o nga ang patient o nga kanang miss nahuman na ta sa imuhang procedure pero uy nabi day mi nakitaan. Okay, sometimes di ba it's not the end of it. So kinsa mo'y angay ana doc mo kuan?
Sir, number one ang physician yun. Okay, physician yun na. So
kaya wala ba sa patient ang medical records kay dili kompleto ang nahatag or something.
So ang responsibility of informing the patient kung unsay iyahang nahitabo, for example, if mao ba ni ang hunahuna unya it turned out they otherwise, okay, it actually falls, and the responsibility of telling is on the physician to tell the patient. Now, as far as the record is concerned, diri na punta mo balik ta sa right sa patient. If he demands that he gets the complete medical record, yes, he can. Dili gyud na siya ma-deny because it is his actually. And as a matter of fact, that right is protected, that even other people cannot actually know without his consent. Mo bitaw na ang atong Data Privacy Act. Okay, ang kuan nga. For example, dili ka pwedeng kapangutan na-admit ba dito si Mr. So and so.
Asa nga room si kuan? Sa una kay okay ba kay sa una
karon dili na.
Kanang asa nga room si ana, mangutana las information asa nga pero karon dili na pwede.
And when I was still a clerk katong fourth year medical student, ang doors usually bears the name of the patient and then usually na daghang doktor diri sa ubos. Now, doctors na lang mong makitaan nga naa sa door. Wala na ang name sa patient because of how important the data
right
privacy is.
So, the right to medical records is absolute. But muna din ha kung pananglitan na ay certain portion of a medical record wa nahatag niya later on has a significance. Kuan gid gyapon na goes back to the responsibility of the physician nga dapat ma-inform nimo maski nahuman na ka sa imong part diri imo nang naputlan, but then if na kay nakitaan something else nga she might need further diagnosis or ana i-inform gid ana ang patient. Okay, sige. Kani naana po ko'y nakitaan din hi doc nga right. Katawanan kay nga right doc, one word ra, the right to live. Unsa man ang the right to live?
Okay. The right to live is like number one, when you go to us, okay, you feel, okay, that we can help you. Okay? But in the course of treatment and in the course of the discussion, you might feel that labi na og ma-explikaran na ka sa like, okay, we'll have to understand, just like from my end as a surgeon, gidivide na mo ang sakit. There are surgical conditions, it means we can operate and we can help you with. Or there are conditions that you don't actually need surgery. A good example is this COVID thing. You don't need my professional service for that. Okay? So, now, pwede man ka moabot na ako because wa makakahibaw nga dili din ni siya operahan. But in the course of the discussion, and then you soon realize that, okay, I don't actually need the help of a surgeon. I need an infectious disease specialist, for example. Then that right belongs to the patient. I, as a physician, cannot insist, uy, ni abi ka na ko ni arihad, ako gi imong doktor gyud. Dili. So ang right niya as a patient, okay, that he can actually, okay, disengage with you because bahala og for whatever feeble nga reason. Okay? Because iyahaman na. Iyahan na siya.
Ang doktor na ay right to leave the
Yeah.
patient
Naasa
pod.
na. Yeah.
Okay. Right
siya.
to leave ang patient. So ang doktor na abay right to leave.
Okay. Ang doctor has the right to leave, disengage with the patient if number one kanang risk to life, okay? Common kay ni, I mean, ang mga pasyente o labi nag-dissatisfied na with the patient. You have heard that there was a doctor who was shot actually in the hospital here in the city. Okay? Ako man ito yung nagtabang ito. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, if the patient, okay, threatens, okay, the physician or his immediate relatives, okay, balobi ko, asa nag-eskwela imong anak.
Bantay ka diha.
Oh
my gosh.
Kana siya. So, for example, if the patient apart sa iyang disease entity nga gikonsulta diha nimo, naa siya gidala nga sakit sa nga igtatakod nga pwede ka matakdan.
Yung
Okay?
pagid musulti niya later on
hibawaan nimo.
Mawagtang ang trust.
Yes. Because ang trust man gud is invaluable as far as patients, doctor, lawyer, and priest, okay? These are dili gid na siya nimo ma-break. But if the patient and of course the doctor soon realizes that this patient is withholding significant information, okay, that will drastically affect, okay, the way I handle him. Ug wala na siya nga trust, then I can always tell, excuse me sir, I believe there are things that you alone knows, but I have already asked you this, okay? But now I have known that you are telling a lie.
Or niingon ko nimo nga nag-take ba ka ani nga tambal ming kag nya lain di ay ang gi-take.
Mo na then I think you need somebody else because if you don't trust me anymore that I can take care of you, okay, then ako sad mo respeto ko ana. So we might as well part good ways.
But ang patient has to signify in writing.
Yes.
Na I release the doctors. Kung kahig ulo, mag patient dili pa gid release labaras ulo sa doktor ana, no? Nga kaning kuan, going back to the right to leave. For example, you say nga, you can do whatever you can in emergency situations. You have the call kay emergency man, so di nakakakuha og mga consent or mga ana. But let's say, for example, after a certain number of days, the patient feels well enough nga makakuha na siya niya. Mingon siya nga, kung naapamang ko diri, uy, ganahan naman ko mo, gawas niya may ng doktor ayaw sa lagi, kay obserbahan pa ka, base noon niya ka ng at risk imuhang health or imong safety if we pull you out too soon. But then the patient will really insist.
Yes.
Yeah, appeal pa na sa iyang right to leave.
Yes, appeal na siya sa iyang right to
Right to
leave.
leave.
But of course,
But how will the doctor protect themselves nga dili sila mabaso later on?
okay. So, what the hospital does, if ever nga mugawas na siya or mo disengage siya sa facility or the doctor, then we ask them, okay, to sign a waiver na if ever something wrong happens to the patient, okay, that they have been fully assessed of the situation and despite being knowledgeable of the possible consequence, they still decided to disengage. So kana ara na.
So mura na siya kanang discharge against medical advice. So at least naagid gihay-gihapoy protection
ang hospital or ang physician.
Ang hospital or ang physician. Now, especially in the field of up-and-coming medicine, doc, daghan og kanang mga up-and-coming medicine no niya, kinahanglan man sad gani ni ipang test or ipang trials niya. Ako kasabot kay kuan kanang ideally, in a given situation, if these people consent to experimental treatment or these new and emerging medicines, nga wa pa gyud kanang
Established nga.
established na mga consequences or indication, kanang if they participate in having those treatment, do they have the right also to refuse nga ang ilang data i-appeal sa medical research?
Okay, good
Di-
question.
Di ba kay
Yeah,
experimental drug ka nya di ka gusto nga i-appeal din sa statistics,
Yeah.
di ba?
This is
research
common.
na,
Like, I am the training officer of surgery sa Cebu City Medical Center. It is actually a requirement for my residents before they graduate, okay, to take a special board exam for surgery, a research paper. Di gana siya mandatory, gana siya. And of course, when you talk about research, there are supposed to be something new and novel, and it has not yet been established. So you are going to pioneer on something. Now, sa pagsugod pagyudaan, okay, the consent is secured that, ma'am, sir, we are undergoing this protocol, okay? Now, this is something new, na this is how it's going to go. Yeah, mao ni siya ang mga possibilities, okay? We can actually help you if this drug, this maneuver, this surgery is going to be done, okay? But nasa na siya possible outcomes, okay? It might not
work.
it might turn south ba? Ba? So dapat makahibalog yun ang pasyente unya. Sir, because you are going to join this research, the data that we are going to use is also going to be published, okay? Although we will protect your identity, okay? What we will send is not actually your name, it's just the code. But we still know who these people and who this code belongs to. So, for as long as they're comfortable with this agreement nga, ang ilang data, i-publish ni siya dito, not only locally, but also internationally. Nga, kibaw sila sa possible consequence, okay? Then, that's valid. Okay? But at any given time, if the patient so desires in the middle of the ball game ba, if he feels nga, mura magdi man ni mao nga kung gi-expect nga outcome, na mura magnisamot man ko hinoon. Because ang mahitabo man god, there is a drug nga established o na ay placebo. The question, the placebo does not actually act in the same manner as the experimental drug. So if in the middle of the treatment or in the experiment, for example, mo feel ang pasyente nga, dili man ni mao, then he can actually disengage at any given time.
But he can choose to be part of the placebo group or part of the research group? Or
Dili na siya.
sad.
Dili sad.
So,
Because
pahibaon gyapon siya ana.
Naay siya studies nga kanang gitawag na mo og double blind.
Blind,
Kasi double blind, ikaw ang researcher, you don't actually know. Ako sa nga pasyente, I also do not know. It's actually a third person who will just decode everything.
Kani
Siya
mo
di
ni
ay mo
ang
ni
with,
nakadawat,
mo ni-
kani siya mo iwa kadawat. Even the researcher, because ang researcher will become biased.
Bitaw kay ako po yung doctor, gusto ko kung labi-labi na promising kayo
Yeah,
ni
promising.
tanan na lang, di na lang ta mag double blind. Di na.
Dili.
What if doki kaning kuan kanang ang pasyente gusto jud siya nga kanang mo appeal sa
Sa
medical gusto gyud siya ato nga medicine, di gyapon siya ka-dictate
Di
nga
siya
ako lang
ka-dictate.
lagi ang kuan,
Pero-
ako lang lagi ang ginipig.
Dili, Dili siya because the golden standard now for medical research is the double blind studies. Mo na siya golden standard yun na siya to eliminate bias. Now if he doesn't want nga ma-engage siya atong double blind, di siya kahibaw, naa sila lahi pod nga protocol nga law. Then it's a different study altogether. But as far as the hierarchy of kanang reliability of the results,
double blind,
mas gwapo itong double blind.
Bitaw kay murag wala man gyud eliminate
Gi-eliminate
mo
man
ang
ang
bias.
bias.
But he can still go
Yeah,
to
but
atong
there's another kanang gitawag na to cohort studies. The
cohort.
cohort studies, because they start with a disease, for example, silang tanan, for example, ang ilang sakit TB, and then there is experimental drug A that's going to be administered to them, and then the usual treatment will be kaning niya as a control
Ano na yung
group.
control group.
So,
Katong cohort, sila to ang
to.
cohort.
Yun na. So, it's a different study together.
Okay. One final thing on this kaning medical research. Kung ikaw may physician, doc, nya kita gyud kag na-promising kay nga new drug. Nya kani nga person is in such a condition, this patient is in such a condition, if you do nothing, he will surely die. If he do something, he might survive. Can you, without his consent, apply the experimental drug on him? Di gyapon.
It's
Kay emergency
okay. So, og ingon ana mga ning kanang there are things that we firmly believe
Wa
in.
siya kibaw nga cohort siya.
Ang thing man good is the patient deserves to know. Deserves to know yun na.
So, even if murag promising kay ni
Yeah.
birthday, yun siya kahatag og ka ng consent
consent.
because it's experimental, you just stick na lang yun sa
Yes,
traditional.
yeah.
So, anaha kay ang the right to refuse participation in medical research is actually absolute.
Absolute sa na siya.
Absolute yun na siya.
Ang kamisan nga mga doctors, okay, we cannot guarantee life.
Mao. Correct. Correct.
But we fully understand that from the point of view of the patient, they would like it to be guaranteed. But we just have to say that, okay, there's still somebody up there, okay, more knowledgeable than we are, okay, and who knows what's going to happen to us. But for us to guarantee, that's something that we cannot give.
Kay ang doktor man gani masakit man. Di ba? Oo, masakit man gani kuan pa lang, di ba? So, okay, finally, kaning mga right to correspondence and receive visitors, again, not absolute. Not absolute.
Dili siya absolute. Kung naay mga emergencies o naay mga kanang public health issues, dili siya. Dili siya.
Right to express grievance, murag anana.
Yes.
Anana.
Okay.
Pwede gyud
Pwede
makareklamo.
gyud siya. Pwede gyud magreklamo.
Oo.
And this is where the importance of kanang the consent comes in. Usually, if the patient knows exactly the in and out of what's going to happen to him, malikaya na to ning grievance. Okay? Pero if you lagi na kanang ug imong gidali-dali, magkamali. So, usually the patient complains because apparently he feels kay kanang on the receiving end dili sakto.
But whether the grievance is kuan naaman sa gyud kanang body no that receives the grievances like dili pud ingon kay basin niya pud og ang patient murag kanang unreasonable rapod pero ang doctor naa gyud di siya panagang. Okay, and then ang patient before they are admitted or before they are received, are they also informed what their rights are, Doc? So, usahay ra ba dali-dali ang pagdawat?
Okay, so
rights ug ilang obligations.
Okay, sa hospitals, in the emergency room or in the admitting section of katong big hospitals, naagyo nagi-plaster gyud na siya. Kanang patient's rights, okay? Pareha po nas bangko katong kanang lending act, you see that prominently, okay? But usually sa mga personal offices, wala na siya. Pero sa hospital nga dagko naagyo na siya.
Bitaw, nakakita mo ko ana, appeal sa dang obligations of patients, appeal na ang obligation to be courteous to your healthcare providers. Sus, Doc, napupus na ang oras, dalian ning labay sa kanang 1 hour. Oy, it has been a very, very illuminating nga discussion. Mo nang paspas kay ni Agi ang time. So, kuan na lang, I would just like to hear final words from you for our viewers.
Okay, so for our viewers, okay, doctors are your partners in health, okay, and as long as you feel comfortable with us, okay, then there could be a lot of things that we can help you with. Then stay safe, everyone.
Okay, on my end, ang akong na-learn yun karon is while patients have rights, they have to exercise those rights responsibly also, and they have to also be aware of their obligation to their doctors kay para smooth ang doctor-patient relationship. So we hope that this episode was able to broaden our viewers' minds. Stay safe, amping tang tanan everybody. God bless us all.